What's up, everyone? Welcome to Catholic Champion. On the show today, we're talking about a just war in Venezuela, plus massive fraud in Minnesota, and of course, yesterday was the 5th anniversary of January 6th. A lot to cover. This is John Yep, your host, co-host Michael Hichborn. See you in a bit. (2026), a year of accountability. Michael, I saw this this big statement that General Flynn put out right before the start of the new year, and I think it's a great way to kind of frame what we want to talk about today on the show. He put out a statement. I'm going to read it, and it says this 2026 year is needs to be, for the health of the country, a year of accountability. He writes, "We the people reject the lies, the gaslighting, the censorship, and the deliberate erosion of our lived reality over the past decade. Will you stand with we the people, or will you protect the system that failed us?" He's writing this to Trump, by the way, President Trump. Flynn's concerns echo the sentiments of a MAGA constituency waning in its enthusiasm for the president, feeling that much of what Trump campaigned on has not been addressed on his second term. It's a respectful address to President Trump. This is a key thing, not one high-profile deep state felon, traitor, or election meddler has been prosecuted. Flynn writes, FBI reforms promised, but no public accounting for Russiagate or January 6th overreach or 2020 election. And he goes on. He talks about the 0 indictments for against the Biden's family's alleged criminal activity, the use of the auto pen during Biden's administration, Anthony Fauci's crimes during the whole COVID era, the new claim that there's no client list for Epstein, the lack of arrests in this pedophile network, despite Trump campaigning for justice on this issue. So our General Flynn, of course, is a senior advisor for Catholics, a good friend, and Michael, you know him too, put out this statement, and it got shared over all of social media, declaring that we the people need this to be a year of accountability. Again, it's an address in support of President Trump, respectfully asking him. And it's hard. And there's a lot of factors when you are president. You're actually not necessarily the top dog. There's an apparatus which transcends elections, which is, people call it the deep state, or however you want to call it, the intelligence community. They have so much power. They have so much control over the Oval Office, that we the people, our job is not done after we've elected the president. We've got to be continuously speaking up, asking President Trump to address some of these topics. And it's big because, if we lose the midterms, Trump will be impeached, and if we lose in whatever the next presidential election, they will come after us with a vengeance. They really will. They will. I was speaking with someone inside, he's staff for inside Congress, and he was just saying, what they have in store in terms of coming after us for, if we thought targeting of Catholics and during the FBI by the FBI during the Biden administration was bad, just wait for what's coming after that. So lots going on. Kind of a good way to frame it 2026 as we begin this new year. And Michael, welcome to the show, man. How was your new year? How was your Christmas?
New Year was good. Christmas was fantastic. My eldest son spent it in Arizona, so your neck of the woods.
Oh, nice.
With his soon-to-be in-laws. So we are excited for 2026.
That is just crazy. That's crazy. So you're letting how old's your boy?
He's 23. Okay. Well, he will be 23 in May.
He's not a boy anymore. So yeah, he's traveling across the country, and does they have a date in mind for marriage?
Yeah, it's going to be the end of May. So right after his birthday. Yeah.
Wow. Did he marry a Phoenix? Is he going to marry a Phoenix girl?
He's marrying an Arizona girl. I don't know that she's from Phoenix, but nearby.
Very cool.
They're getting married here in Virginia at the Christ the King Chapel at Christendom College.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. Well, Craig, congrats to you and as the dad, and that's going to be that's awesome. It's an event. Marriage is something else. So, well, good. So you got things going on there. So, but we got a lot going on in the world, right? We have. Where were you? I think what was it? The night of January 5th, I want to say. Sunday night where we woke up and next morning and the United States was at war. But you quickly correct me, it's not a war. So, we saw that Trump's been putting so much pressure on Venezuela, right? Since, for the past year, he brought probably one of the largest armadas to the shores of Venezuela. He had been, speaking up about this for a long time. Nicolás Maduro, who's been in power for such a long time, a heavy socialist, communist dictator, a tyrant of sorts. And
not of sorts. He is an absolute tyrant. Horrible, horrible, horrible man.
Absolutely. And he, of course, succeeded Hugo Chavez, who was probably even worse, right? Assisted essentially in the destruction of Venezuela, right? So, brought Armada to the shores, and we were kind of just giving him a lot of pressure for many months. And we woke up and with the news that President Maduro had been extradited over to New York. So, initial thoughts on this whole raid, war, however you want to call it, Michael. What'd you think?
Well, my first initial thought was, well, good. The fact of the matter is Maduro's a monster. He is a socialist. Actually, he's a communist who likes to, pattern his words to be more of a socialist rather than a communist. But he's a communist. And, I've seen some people say, oh, but he was pro-life and he was pro-family and he was putting out he was holding firm on social issues because he's a Catholic. None of this is true. None of this is true. Now, does Venezuela have pro-life laws, some of the strongest on the books? The answer is yes.
That's not true because, I mean, people I like Tucker. I love Tucker. I mean, he was one of the biggest voices trying to making this point that Maduro has banned, I think, homosexual marriage, right? And
he did not. It was already illegal, and so was abortion. In fact, abortion had been illegal in Venezuela since 1933. So the thing is, Maduro wasn't actually holding the line. His administration was pushing for liberalization with regard to homosexuality, liberalization with regard to transgenderism and abortion, and so forth. Now, he himself would say things in public, just as any politician does. I'm one of you, and elect me because I'm going to hold firm to our country's traditional morals, etc. But his administration has been firmly set against those very things that he said he was going to uphold. So no, it's not true at all.
Okay, so we removed him, and yes, I mean, and I have my reasons why this was a good thing. First of all, the operation, okay? I don't care what side you are
Laser
on.
precision.
What's that?
Laser precision.
Incredible, right? No matter what you think about the Venezuela intervention, war, okay? What the United States military did was unbelievable, okay? Which really only America could have pulled off. And just credits to so many minds that were behind that, right? To make that happen. It does show you the power that we have as a nation and responsibility, of course, for being able to pull that off, because it was to be there in the dead of night, to shut down their air defenses, to be able to go in there without apparently no casualties at all, or loss of equipment, as Trump noted. He's always careful. He always remembers that kind of stuff, right? And so, incredible operation. Okay, so we remove Maduro. He's on a ship. He's back in New York. But people out there are saying, this is just war? For a refresher, there is a thing called Catholic just war theory, right? St. Augustine and St. Anselm or Ambrose. Is it? Yeah, it's Ambrose. I believe it's Ambrose or Anselm. They're going to correct me on that. But the just war theory, couple principles, refresher, what that is, okay? As Catholics, we believe that for a war to be just, right, an act of virtue, all right, it needs to have a certain benchmarks to what the intervention, right? Those are: war must, number one, a just cause. War must be for a morally acceptable reason, like defending against grave, certain, and lasting harm or protecting innocent life. That's number one. Number two, right intention. The goal must be to establish a just peace, not a vengeance or a conquest. Number three, proper authority. Only legitimate public authorities responsible for the common good can declare war. Number 4, last resort. All other peaceful, practical options must have been exhausted. Number 5, reasonable chance of success. There must be a realistic prospect of achieving the just aims. And number 6, proportionality is the last one. The expected good from the war must outweigh the harm it will cause. Michael, just war or not?
Well, as I said before, this isn't actually a war. Maduro was charged in United States courts with various crimes against the United States. And in fact, it was Joe Biden that signed the warrant for Maduro's capture and arrest. He even put out a $25 million, a bounty for arrest or leading to the capture of Maduro. And I will never forget that in 2020, Joe Biden actually put out on X a statement saying that, Donald Trump is friends with Maduro and he would never do anything to counter his friend. But we will take strong measures to try and bring him to justice. That was Biden's statement. Biden did nothing with the 4 years trying to do anything to capture Maduro. And so Trump, within the first year of office, goes in there and he takes him out. Doesn't kill him, doesn't execute him, actually brings him to New York to be tried for the charges that were brought against him. So the question then has to be asked, is this an act of war? And I say no, this was not an act of war because Maduro was not the legitimate leader or ruler of Venezuela. He was never recognized as such. The United States never recognized him. Biden's administration did not recognize him as the leader of Venezuela. And there were several other international communities that did not recognize Maduro as the leader of Venezuela. So can you say that a usurper to a leadership position within a country being extracted from that country by another national force, can you say that that is actually an act of war? And I say, no, you can't, because, and if you look at the reactions of Venezuelans around the world to the extraction of Maduro, they are celebrating by the thousands. I think that very clearly we can say that this was not an act of war, but was actually an extraction of an illegitimate ruler. So going back to the points of just war theory.
But can I make a point though? So who is the legitimate ruler then of Venezuela?
Well, in my opinion, it would be the opposition party that ran against him last time around.
Maria Machado, essentially.
Yes.
Basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. Which is, it's common knowledge that he did steal the election. Okay. He was, I think it was like 80%, but the vote that he lost, or he didn't, or the Machado had, right? So you're saying Machado's the legitimate ruler. Okay. So all that we did was remove the illegitimate ruler, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, keep going. I push back on that, but yeah, finish your thought on the just war. You're going to go to that?
Yeah, so when it comes to just war theory, now this is the other problem that we're seeing from people, especially within Catholic circles, saying, oh, this was an unjust assault on another country and they extracted the legitimate ruler, et cetera, et cetera. The problem here is that those individuals are looking at this in a two-dimensional way. In other words, they're saying, well, this is the United States versus Venezuela. But we're not dealing with a two-dimensional problem here, because the issue with Venezuela has many, many, many layers to it, actually going deeply into the international globalist movement towards an international globalist socialist regime. Venezuela, and a lot like Ukraine and a few other proxy locations, was involved in the steal of the election in 2020 through the Smartmatic machines.
Yes.
Venezuela had been providing oil to direct enemies of the United States, specifically China. Venezuela was involved in creating civil discord within the United States. They actually collaborated with Cuba to create riots within the United States to destabilize our citizenry. So if you want to talk about acts of war, they start with Venezuela. They're actually deeply involved with money laundering operations going back to the Democrats in the United States, operating through agencies like USAID and several other state funding operations that, and the thing is, they are conducting these money laundering projects, and the money laundering sends the money out of the United States through what appears to be legitimate means, but then is going back into the United States through Act Blue and various other Democrat funding coffers to keep the Democrat Party artificially propped up. So this is it's not two-dimensional symmetrical operations here. You're talking about multiple layers, and it's not country versus country. It's the United States versus the globalist regime trying to implement a globalist hegemony.
Let's go deeper in that, because I think it's weak if we just approach this like, okay, Maduro is not the legitimate ruler. Therefore, we as a country are going to get involved in this, country hundreds of miles away and just remove him. Okay. Because think about it. How many illegitimate rulers are there across countless countries in the world, right?
But how many of those illegitimate rulers are operating against the United States and using the platform of the country to enact operations against the United States?
Okay, so right, so illegitimate authority. I think it's a weaker. I mean, okay, he is, but interestingly enough, if our premise was to remove an illegitimate leader, and we're kind of collectively saying that Maria Machado is a legitimate ruler, I guess. But explain the fact that President Trump, I think this morning, has backed through a social media post, he backs Maduro loyalists over Venezuelan opposition leader. In other words, he backs Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president. So it's not that President Trump, in that sense, is backing the legitimate ruler. He's actually backing the administration of the illegitimate ruler, Delcy Rodriguez.
Right.
Interesting.
And I don't understand that at all. I can't address that. I don't understand.
It's Trump too. So things are constantly fluctuating in terms of what, where, whatever. And that might change in a heartbeat, right? Just the way it is, right? Delcy, and again, General Flynn had a great point with this too. In some ways, it's wrong to call it regime change. In some ways, that leader's been removed. The Venezuelan constitution is very clear. It has when a president is removed, okay, and they have 30 days to kind of make an assessment whether or not he's going to be back, right? Vice president takes control, which is, it's not like it's been left in total chaos without a head. There she is, Delcy Rodriguez, who's perhaps worse even than Maduro, okay? Then they're kind of election in 30 days, apparently, according to the Venezuela constitution, right, to determine who will be the next president, right? So I like what you're coming at, which is what I agree with, is aside from legitimate, illegitimate ruler or not, but it's who attacked who. In that sense, I think you could call it a war, because there was multiple acts of aggression against the United States. You hit two of them, right? The 2020 election, right? Let's go right there. And President Trump himself, I'm glad he brought this up again. Trump pushes, this is from Forbes, but conspiracy that Venezuela helped Biden win after Maduro's capture. Okay. President Trump revived claims that Venezuela helped steal the 2020 election for Joe Biden, putting the theory back in the spotlight. Okay. Key points. He shared several posts on Truth Social, pushing claims that voting machines helped flip votes from Trump to Biden in the 2020 election. Trump allies pushed claims in 2020 that tied the voting machines companies to election frauds and involved Venezuela, claiming companies' Dominion voting systems and Smartmatic had initially been created to rig elections in Venezuela in favor of former leader Hugo Chavez and employed the same tactics to help Biden win. Okay. So, I believe that they're involved. Okay. I think they had a role. So, that was attack on our system first, a serious attack on the very rule of law. Our own democracy, our power to vote, right? So would you agree? That was an act of war on their part.
Absolutely. If you want to put it in terms of an act of war, that certainly constitutes an act of war to manipulate the duly appointed leadership of a country, sure. I mean, that certainly stands. I just don't know that the country of Venezuela is properly represented by an illegitimate leader. And so therefore, can it be said that an act of war or a state of war exists between the United States and Venezuela? I think it's more appropriate to say that a criminal took over the country and that criminal has now been duly removed.
Or call it a Cold War. How about that? I mean, here's the deal. You guys have been sending drugs, okay, through into the country, okay, for years. And how many Americans have died because of it, okay?
Mhm.
And yes, emptying out your prisons and sending them up. Granted, it was an open border. So in some sense, why do you blame them? But the fact of the matter is they were sending like Trinidad, right, et cetera, into the United States to create unrest, kill people, kill Americans. That's an act of war, right? So they were attacking us, right, in a lot of ways. Okay, so what about the whole thing with oil? Okay, and this gets into the whole debate about Greenland, okay? Because now we're talking about, and Trump's quick to the punch. We've been, talking about perhaps annexing Greenland, okay? Michael, what's your opinion? If there is all this oil, which there is $30 trillion worth of oil down there in Venezuela, right? Trump talked about it today on Truth Social again, and it's in the hands of bad hombres, whether from Russia, whether from China. Okay. At what point do you have a responsibility as a country, that's trying to operate, for the best interest of your own people to protect that asset? And I think you were kind of going at this with how this bleeds into the whole globalist structure of what's going on in the world today. You want to comment on that?
Well, I'm not sure I understand your question.
As far as, okay, you have this oil, you have this big oil reserve down there, okay? And it's up for grabs, right? It's being, Russia's trying to get in there, China's trying to get in there. They're obviously trying to extend their reach into South America, okay?
Sure.
And at what point do you, as a country, as the United States, you know what, like we should be involved down there, okay? Because that's the same rationale, according to Trump, for why we want to annex Greenland, okay? Because it's a national security risk, okay? Do you have a right as a country, therefore, to protect your own, to say, you know what, we need to be involved in Venezuela. We need to secure that oil so it doesn't fall into bad hands, okay? And the same with Greenland, right?
So a lot of it comes down to economic opportunity, and then the other part of it is control. So the question then boils down
economic
to
opportunity or economic protection, right?
Well, so again, a lot of it boils down to a matter of use of force in order to maintain or control a resource. Does the United States have a right to take control of a resource in another country through the use of force of arms? The answer to that question, I would say ostensibly, is no. That if another country is operating in good faith and operating with the right intention to simply utilize their resource according to what is best for their country and then sell it to whomever, somebody who's willing to pay the price that they're asking, then for one country like the United States or anybody else to go in there with the force of arms to try and take control of those resources for their own use, I think would be illicit. But if we're talking about a country who is being operated, again, it boils down to what is legitimate rulership. And I would say that any country that is under communist occupation would not qualify as a legitimate authority within a country's rules. So,
like New York City?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I think that any communist ruler within the world is not a legitimate ruler, and therefore there could be a case to be made that, yeah, it might be in the best interest of the country nearest by or the country with capable means to put those resources into proper authority or into at least capable hands. But again, you'll look at, is the United States operating out of self-interest, or is it operating out of an altruistic understanding or opportunity for the people from whom the resources are being taken?
Or both.
I-
No nation,
It's
no
possible
human
to be
being
both.
operates,
It's
right?
possible to be both. But, you get a lot of people on our side who are sitting there going, oh, we didn't want war for oil in Iraq, so now we don't want war for oil in Venezuela. And I sympathize with that particular mindset because, honestly, I don't like the idea of empire building. I think that it's a wrong-headed approach to the way the United States ought to be operating. I think the United States ought to be working toward hegemony. In other words, operating for self-sustainability as a country without the need for international trade as much as possible. And to then go and say that, well, we need to control this asset on the other side of the world or this asset down below. If it's about trying to keep the communists from having a toehold within our hemisphere, I'm all for that. I think that we need to make sure that the communists have no means of getting to the United States because they are a clear and present danger to the people of this country. But if it's just a matter of resources and giving funds to, say, your financial backers or your corporate friends, well, now we're talking about a completely different set of problems. I don't know all of the ins and outs of what the situation is regarding the oil down in South America enough to be able to make a cogent argument for or against. But as a principle, I would say that the United States may be able to express an interest in controlling the oil, provided that they are doing their best for the interests of the people in Venezuela prior to the interests of the United States. If that is the disposition, then that's something I can get on board with.
It's a more basic situation. Let's say you live in a street, you have the largest house in the block, i.e. the United States, right? You get a massive house, and 3 doors down, there's a small house, right? Which inside that house, they have tons of weapons, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the owners of that house are basically not capable. They're illegitimate, whatever you want to call it. And those weapons are being distributed to nefarious parties. And those nefarious parties are going to come and they're going to shoot up your own house. At what point do you have a right, as that big house owner in the United States, to go in there, not just a right, but duty and common sense, to go and protect your own house and get in there and remove those arms, right? So I think there's a little bit of, I think, of that, because you have all this oil, all this money there in Venezuela, right? And it's been run by Maduro, okay? And he's been flirting, literally like the day before that he was captured, with one of the key ministers of China, right? Communist China, about, and also Iran was very close to him as well. So at what point do you say, like, look, we need to step in here, this is our hemisphere, whether you call it the Monroe Doctrine or what, to protect those assets, right? Is that what you're kind of saying? Are we on the same page there?
I think we're mostly on the same page there. Again, a lot of this has to do with intention. And if your intention is to maintain security, not just for your own country, but for the good people of Venezuela as well, again, I can get on board with that. If your intention is to go in and steal the resources for your own use, or just to say, you know what, this is more of an interest to the United States and the Venezuelans don't really need it, well, that's a problem. And I think that what's happening is that we're now engaged in a PR war where the left and some on the right are saying, well, Trump is going in there for his own self-interest, or he's actually going in there for the interests of Israel somehow. And so what they're saying is that it's an illicit and illegitimate act of the use of force to try and go in and take control of those resources for the better purposes of the United States and his allies. Or conversely, we could say that he is going in there for not just the good of the United States, but also the good of the Venezuelan people. And the removal of Maduro was a necessary step to achieving that. Well, then you can make that argument and you can make that case. Unfortunately, this administration, I have noticed, is not very good at articulating a moral case, and they tend to repeat the loudest talking point that is most acceptable to the people, which is kind of the danger of having a populist president. So we're not going to get the clearest or the best argument coming out of this administration to make the best possible case for why he did what he did. I'm simply saying that I think that as a Catholic, we can look at this from an objective standpoint and say, if this was the case on the one hand, it's legitimate, but if this is the case on the other hand, it's not legitimate, and there are moral problems here.
See, this is the problem too. When you have why we need to be praying for our country, because you have such distrust over, which is just built. It's at steroid level right now in the institutions. Whether it's the FBI, whether it's the CIA, whether it's the United States Congress. So we know enough to know that we're not getting all the information, right? And that we've been lied to many times. We will be lied to many more times in the future. So people like you and I, and we the people who are paying for our tax dollars to fund these operations, and sometimes our own blood, American blood, for these wars, we're left in the dark, like what's going on here, right? So it's I think, and I think we have to have a little bit of humility, and you already showed that too, in terms of we don't know everything that's going on, right? We just don't, right? None of us are. I'm not an expert in Venezuela, neither are you, neither are most people. There are experts out there who I do trust, right? And I try to communicate a lot of those points of what they're saying, but it's there's a lot of unknowns. I will give credit to President Trump too, in the sense of, we're all worried about a prolonged war, right? Are we going to just disappear like in Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq? To his credit, President Trump in his first term, and most recently too, even though in the whole scrap with Iran, when he was getting so much pressure from Israel and people like Lindsey Graham for a prolonged war in Iran and a legitimate regime change, he was able to avoid that, right? In part to Charlie Kirk's help, right? So I do trust Trump in some ways with this ability to be able to, for a laser strike, that's a key dimension of a just war, right? Is the proportionality, like what will
minimal harm
too, right? So and again, it's not like it's been left in total chaos, like we just removed everyone. Like they do have an acting vice president, and Trump has back the acting vice president, who is, yes, pretty bad person, and is surrounded by a lot more bad people, right? So time will tell, and we'll be following this. Should we shift to the Minnesota fraud scandal with our favorite Tim Walz of Minnesota? What's going on there, man? That's Michael. That's your favorite. That's your favorite governor in the great state of Minnesota. Talk to us about that. What's going on there?
Yeah. So Tim Walz is he. I'm sure everybody knows by now that he is under heavy scrutiny for this massive fraud scheme that was exposed by a 23-year-old investigative journalist. This guy is just starting out, and he took it upon himself. Now, the way the story developed, Nick Shirley, the way the story developed, he was in contact with somebody who did all the research, who did all the background research, which is what I do. Okay. We do the open source analysis. We take the information. We say, okay, there's a problem because you see all the money going in. You don't see a whole lot of operation coming out. And so what the initial researcher did is he went to Nick Shirley and he said, there is a system of billions and billions of dollars of fraud with regard to these Somali daycare centers. So Nick Shirley said, okay, let's go knock on some doors and see if there's anything to this. So he and his collaborator, this guy right here, you see him, I don't know his name. They went door to door and they just started knocking on these Somali daycare centers and walking in like the Leering Center, which everybody's laughing about. But they went in and they started asking questions. They said, okay, are you open? Where are the children? How many people do you have working at this facility? And how many children do you have at this facility? And the thing is, they were sent away time and time and time again. They also found that not only were they sent away from various daycare centers, but they were also being told they were finding that most of them were closed. They weren't even in operation. There was no sign of activity. There was no sign that these organizations even existed except for a door with a sign on it. And that's it. This is now expanded to others going in and saying, okay, is this just a matter of Somali daycare centers? It's not. It's a matter of daycare or of Somali health facilities. So other journalists have taken upon themselves to go to various health facilities, healthcare centers, to see if they're in operation. And they're not. They're not in operation. They're not actually performing the health operations that they say they are. They're, again, an empty office and usually staffed by one person who comes to the door, says, don't come in here, and sends them away. So then there's been further investigation into, well, okay, this money's going into these centers, but where's that money going? Because we're seeing that these centers are not in operation. They don't look like the millions of dollars of function that would go into a daycare center or a healthcare center that, had it been in operation, would have been a nice office building with a lot of activity with, you're not seeing that. So where'd the money go? So now they're tracking down where the money went, and it looks like a lot of the money went back into Act Blue. And Act Blue, of course, is going to elect Democrats. So this is a massive, huge, massive scale money laundering operation, and it goes all the way to Tim Walz. And Tim Walz, of course, has been saying, well, I've been tough on this, and we've already started investigating this, and we've filed complaints, and nothing's being done about this fraud, and it's a lie. It's an absolute lie. He actually has been stymieing investigations. In fact, I want to point you to, let me see if I can find this particular statement that came out just, where is it? There it is. Okay, so Majority Whip Tom Emer held a he was part of this investigation into the alleged misuse of federal funds in Minnesota. And he was asking questions of a panel of experts with regard to what Tim Walz knew and how he knew it. We're going to jump real quick to just the first minute or so of this, if we can throw this on the screen.
On this issue for years. You've spoken to the whistleblowers personally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You have an understanding that 1,000 whistleblowers running an account on X have come forward to expose fraud in Minnesota state agencies, and they have been entirely ignored by Tim Walz and have even been retaliated against. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Even this morning, I got another message.
Well, in your experience, are their claims credible, or are they politically motivated against Walz?
They're completely credible, not politically motivated.
In fact, many of these are Walz administration employees, correct?
They are actually Democrats as well.
Can you quickly give us one example of...
Okay, what we just saw is that this person who's testifying had thousands of whistleblowers that were coming forward and saying that there was a massive amount of fraud pertaining to these Somali daycare centers. These whistleblowers, many of whom were Democrats, were part of Tim Walz's appointed staff, and they lost their jobs. They were forced out. They were threatened. One thing that comes to mind, Tim Walz, of course, likes to parade around what was her name? The politician that was murdered in Minnesota.
I forget, but
yeah, I forget her name. But she was the one holdout when it came to a particular vote on healthcare for for a lot of these institutions. And she, of course, was murdered by an appointee of Tim Walz. So when you start to look at the dots, you connect the dots, you look at the way things are going, the threats against whistleblowers, the firings, the unjust firings of whistleblowers. Tim Walz is fully and totally complicit in this whole situation. And the fraud.
Melissa Hortman, she was on June 14, 2025. Yeah. She was assassinated in a shooting in her home in Brooklyn, Minnesota.
Yep. So when you start looking at the different connections here, suddenly things start to make a whole lot of sense. And I'm wondering not only how complicit Tim Walz is, but how far-reaching this whole situation becomes. I saw this morning that there were investigations going on in Ohio with regard to Somali daycare centers. There are now investigations in New England regarding Somali daycare centers, and it's the same story over and over and over again.
And apparently, and I'm reading this too, from General Flynn that this might extend into the other side of the aisle. Okay, so there was a some initial reporting that said that according to General Flynn, money is being cycled through Republican PACs and funneled right back into daycare operations, like in Minnesota, and healthcare clinics. So basically, our tax dollars go to PACs, then the clinics, as like daycares, and there's complete silence, right? So it's there's a reason why Elon Musk, I think, tweeted out a couple days ago that he estimates that 10% of the whole entire federal budget is it's made up of fraudulent activity like this through this. So these government programs, I'm sitting here like, I can't even believe this. Like I heard about the story with Minnesota, and it was just like the back of my mind, I was like, I don't want to go there. It's just like, I cannot believe, I believe it. And it's like, it's finally coming out. It's like, what do you do? Like, this is pretty crazy.
Well, yeah, it's not just crazy. I mean, it's criminal. we're talking about criminal fraud within not just a state administration. This is a systemic problem this is why Act Blue has been investigated for the last several months.
Right.
Act Blue is directly involved in a lot of this money laundering when it comes to finances going out from a lot of NGOs. And again, when you start looking at what Trump has been doing for the last year, Trump went after USAID. Now, initially, it seemed kind of odd. Why would he go after USAID? Now, I know, because I've been investigating USAID and the organizations receiving USAID funds for a long time. And for my purposes within Catholic investigation, what we were trying to do was stop a lot of the push for the population control agenda that comes out of USAID. However, one of the things that I had noted with regard to USAID is that the funds were going to NGOs that were primarily staffed by Democrats, and that the Democrats were then using their large salaries, so U.S. subsidized salaries. They were taking their large salaries and making massive contributions to Act Blue and other Democrat causes. So there was a quid pro quo going on here. And you start to break open the fact that he put the kibosh on USAID. Now he's put the kibosh on any funding for NGOs within the United States, which is going to financially cripple a lot of the Democrat slush funds that are going to prop up their campaigns. This goes even deeper now because we're seeing that these financial incentives going to social programs. And this is, again, why are the Democrats so insistent on making sure that financial contributions are being given to these illegal immigration operations, these immigrant programs, these social programs, these welfare programs? Why are they so insistent? And they say that it's for altruistic reasons, but the fact of the matter is they're getting massive kickbacks because these people become an army for vote fraud. And they're finding now that the Somalis have been involved in a lot of vote fraud in several states.
Can you explain the Somali angle, by the way? Go deeper into that. Why are they at the center of this whole fraud scandal in Minnesota?
So I don't know exactly why the Somalians specifically are the ethnic organization or the ethnic basis for a lot of this. I think by and large, the Somalis are, they're being used. They're kind of a pawn in the game. And I think that they're seeing, well, we as a community are getting a lot of financial support. So therefore we're
not innocent pawns by no means.
Not innocent. No, of course not. In fact, one of the things that I read in an Epoch Times article was that Somalia has kind of an institutional understanding that fraud is natural, that we're supposed to be defrauding our government and we're supposed to be stealing from our neighbor in order to sustain and support our own families. And
it's only wrong if you get caught.
That's right. And who is our family? Our family is not just my husband, my wife, my children, my parents, my grandparents. It's also my aunts and uncles and my cousins and my further extended in-laws and everybody else within my tribe. So you're not talking about a people that see the use of fraud for sustaining their own immediate family, but also everybody that could possibly be connected to them on a genealogical bush. So you're talking about.
By the way, is that's an argument right there, because we have this idea that we have to welcome everybody into the country,
Mhm.
whoever it is. Absolutely not. No,
Right.
forget it. No, you have to have, you are going to bring people in the country who are going to believe like you, who are going to respect the rule of law like you, who are Christian by and large, right? Because we are a Christian nation, right? So we have to be in adherence of those basic principles of what we were founded on, right? And if that they're coming in with that attitude right from the get-go, that's a bad recipe. It's a
Mhm.
recipe for disaster, and that's what we're seeing right now in Minnesota.
Absolutely. Just 2 hours ago, Gunther Eagleman, a popular X account, put this out. He said, breaking, Jim Jordan just exposed the massive feeding our future fraud in today's House Oversight hearing. Convicted ringleaders Amy Bach and Salim Saeed ran a $250 million scam stealing taxpayer money meant for feeding kids, all while no kids got fed. Minnesota Dems suspended payments in 2021 over clear fraud flags from whistleblowers, but after threats of lawsuits accusing racism and recorded meeting where Attorney General Keith Ellison promised to, quote, fight state agencies to keep the money flowing, payments resumed. Weeks later, Ellison's campaign got donations from people in that very meeting. This wasn't oversight failure. It was active assistance, political payoffs, and playing the race card to cover billions shaken from federal programs. Dems didn't just ignore the fraud. They helped it along for votes and cash. Now Walz and Ellison are called to testify next month. Accountability is coming. So we're talking about a very, very serious system of fraud that it raises the question, why did Kamala Harris pick Tim Walz to be her running mate? And I think
Great
a lot of
question.
it has to do with not only his involvement in this fraud, but his expertise in orchestrating and facilitating the fraud, and perhaps because he also knew where a lot of the fraud was going and could pull the strings and say, you better pick me or else.
Logical explanation. Obviously, he was a white male, right? And they needed that that profile of the white man Rust Belt to come out for the Democrats. Obviously, they didn't, right? And Tim Walz failed miserably in bringing those people, right, except for his home state. But I think it's a plausible explanation for why he was chosen. So this fraud's at the center of it. I asked you offline too if there is an element of Catholic involvement at all, but we don't really know much at this point, correct?
Right. There is a lot of inference that Catholic Charities was highly involved. And yes, we do know that Catholic Charities was involved in bringing in the Somalis and resettling the Somalis. In fact, in 2010, when I was first investigating the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, there was a Somali action group that was receiving CCHD funding in Chicago. And they were a very suspicious group. And we found all sorts of anomalies with regard to that particular organization receiving funds from the CCHD. And shortly after I exposed it to the higher ups at the USCCB, that organization stopped receiving CCHD funds. But there are a lot of other Somali groups that I noticed are at least tangentially involved with CCHD organizations, Catholic Campaign for Human Development. So a lot of the community organizing element of this. And what do you see within the community organizing groups is this willingness to orchestrate and facilitate riots, to be involved in a lot of these showdowns with police and calling for defunding of police, going against ICE and fighting against ICE. And in fact, this morning, there was a woman who tried running down an ICE agent in Minnesota, and she was shot and killed by the ICE agent. And immediately you have a lot of these people starting to form a mob right there in the middle of where that shooting took place as the investigation was underway. And now they're having kind of a showdown with the ICE agents. And I haven't seen any recent footage. This was from this morning, so I don't know what the situation currently is at this moment, but I can say that these showdowns don't happen in a vacuum. They don't just spark out of nowhere. And one of the things that Trump is doing now is investigating George Soros and several other large financing organizations like the Tides Foundation, the Noyes Foundation.
Those aren't grassroots rosary rallies, essentially,
Yeah.
against, right.
Yeah. Except these are rosary rallies. Sure. These are these are people that are orchestrating socialist revolts around the country, and he's now investigating them for terrorism and international. I can't remember what the word he used was, but what he's going after is this attempt to overthrow the United States yet again through these various community organizing groups,
which are being funded, right, to large part by our own taxpayer dollars, right? It's like we're
in
funded,
large part by the Catholic Church through the Campaign for Human Development, and have been funded through them for many, many, many years.
Which is just mind-boggling to actually get your head around that, that our own money from the pews or government grants, right, have been given to like Catholic Campaign for Human Development and given to leftist Marxist groups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've been the best in the business at really kind of addressing that, Michael, and tracking those grants. And it's important we do that because this unrest, and I think just before we started the show, there was an ICE agent was shot, correct? And shot, and it was the details on that. What the woman was trying to run him over, correct?
She was trying to run him over, and she was shot.
She was shot, right? So,
and
there's a
she is
reason.
now deceased.
What's that?
She is now deceased.
She's deceased, and we pray for her soul, right? But it's there's a reason that Catholics for Catholics in a few weeks in Washington, D.C., we're going to be giving an award, the Protector of America Award, to border czar Tom Homan. He was a good man, good Catholic. And we just want to make a point. Obviously, number one, for restoring order to our communities like Minnesota and braving these crazy people like this woman who tried to just run over this ICE agent, right? They're restoring order. Tom is at the tip of the spear of that. And of course, most importantly, now it's like over 62,000 kids that they have rescued from human trafficking. These are migrant children who came across the border, who were lost, and Tom, just per direction from President Trump and the mandate of the American people, has gone seeking those people. So Catholics for Catholics will be doing an event, very public. You can watch it live. It's right there on our site, all of our socials, January 22nd, right by the March for Life, 11 o'clock Eastern time. And we're going to be giving this award to him. Bishop Strickland, we're going to announce, will actually be giving the award to Tom Homan with us there in support. So we need this. Like, God is a God of order, right? He put order into the cosmos, right? The chaos that existed before the creation of the world, right? So that's what we as humans must do, whether it's physically creating order or obviously most importantly, spiritual order within our own souls. Okay. So important stuff that's going on. It's a battle right now for America. And final comments about this whole fraud before you hit the J6?
I would only say that with regard to the fraud, we have to pay very particular attention, not just to the fact of the fraud and the event of the fraud, but as General Flynn pointed out, accountability has to be done. We have to make sure that the people who were facilitating it, perpetrating it, participating it, are brought to justice and thrown in prison.
Absolutely, because let me tell you, they will do it again. They absolutely will do it again. Bannon said the other day, addressed a bunch of Republicans. He said, look, if there are no arrests, mark my words. He said that some of you in this room will be in prison in 4 or 5 years. Okay. They'll come after us. Right. Because they've learned there are no consequences. Like a little kid, right? If you can tell a kid, don't do that, don't do that, don't do it, don't, and it's until you take the treat away, they don't get the message. Right. So it's a serious situation right now in America. And it's just, I was a bit dismayed these past few weeks looking at the situation in politics in general. Some of it was stemming just from the craziness of the Charlie Kirk investigation, the lack of answers, or just the incoherent narratives from so many different angles, right? And a lot of other things. But we're in this world, and it's just like, at the end of the day, it's Jesus Christ that we need. He's the only person that can really change things. It's the power of our Catholic faith, not just a watered down version of it, through what, a Protestant version or something like that, it's got to be the 7 sacraments of Holy Mother Church. That is what is salvific. January 6th. Yesterday was the 5th anniversary of January 6th. In a breathtaking display of political theater, congressional Democrats gathered on the steps of the U.S. Capitol on Tuesday evening for a candlelight vigil to mark the 5th anniversary of the January 6th Capitol event, commonly known by the American people as the Fed-surrection. While once again refusing to condemn, probably, like, take a poll, it's what most people, Americans, think today, refusing to condemn years of left-wing riots, arson, political violence that ravaged American cities with near total impunity. Led by House Speaker Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who might become the majority leader if we lose the midterms. And I think it's like a 90% chance right now the Democrats are going to retake the House. And of course, Chuck Schumer. The group of Democrats stood in the freezing DC air, clutching flickering candles and singing "God Bless America." What a paradox. Family members of law enforcement who defended the Capitol and helped to shoot Ashley Babbitt, the only person killed on January 6th, were there in attendance that day, last night.
Speaking of Ashley Babbitt, did you see that the police officer that shot her?
I heard it was
owned the
debunked.
daycare center?
I heard that was debunked.
It was
But I didn't
debunked.
have time to properly research, which is why I bit my tongue on that. But I hear what you're saying. So, yeah, Michael Byrd, right, who
Mhm.
shot Ashley Babbitt in cold blood, right?
Mhm.
You know, apparently he had one of the same schemes. His wife runs a daycare center, took
Yep.
government grants in Baltimore, I think it is, Maryland. And but again, that's
If it's been debunked, then I retract my statement.
maybe it's true.
I
We'll have
haven't
to
seen
find out.
I haven't seen the evidence.
People in the comments can opine and tell us otherwise, but wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. But it's so let's just, I mean, thoughts on January 6th, 5 years out, Michael. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, imagine holding a candlelight vigil for an event that you yourself perpetrated on the American people.
You're saying the Democrats were behind that? Explain that.
Well, I mean, the fact of the
Remind
matter
the audience
is,
what this is. Like, what was January 6th? What really happened?
yeah, well, Nancy Pelosi was asked multiple times to bring in the National Guard to stop the mob from inciting the people that were present at the Capitol from engaging in the vandalism or the break-in of the Capitol building, and she refused. And she's on record refusing to bring in the National Guard, refusing to actually allow the Capitol Police to do what they were supposed to do to begin with. There's film footage all over the place of Capitol Police escorting people through the Capitol building as if it's a tour, not as if it was an actual mob-inspired riot. You've got the fact that there were federal agents on the ground wearing MAGA hats, inciting the people to actually go into the Capitol building to try and
Michael, how can you
this is
say
called
that? Where have you
entrapment.
heard that? What's your source for that? There were plainclothesmen, FBI undercover there. Who's told you that? Are you reading off X? Of course you're not, because that came from the FBI itself, which admitted finally, after many years, that there were 274 plainclothes agents who were embedded in the crowds during the events of January 6th. And as the video clearly shows, they themselves were escorting and encouraged people to break into windows and go inside the Capitol.
Which is the very definition of entrapment. And the fact that the people who were imprisoned on January 6th were never given an actual fair trial, and they were just held indefinitely and found guilty en masse by Congress is absolutely absurd. There was no presentation of evidence. There was no actual investigation. In fact, the Congress at the time, controlled by the Democrats, withheld certain video evidence that would have exonerated several of the J6 prisoners. So the whole thing being perpetrated by the Democrat Party, again, I stand by my statement. Imagine holding a vigil for an event that you yourself caused.
It's a disgrace. It's one of the worst things in American history. You had those people who were gathering on that January day, right? They were first with President Trump at the lips right there with him, and then they marched over peacefully to the 98% of the people there that day, the American citizens, behaved in an orderly way, right? Some of them got out of hand, right? It didn't help, of course, they were encouraged incited. They were shot at with tear gas,
Yep.
hit, beaten, shot. Okay, literally Ashley Babbitt. So that was 2%. Yeah, they reacted. They, they pushed back. They fought back. But by and large, it was a display of democracy at work. Yes, I said that because they were there with legitimate concerns about the 2020 election. They were there to make their voices heard. Okay, you will recall that there was a number of senators and members of the United States Congress who were willing to like stop the certification of the vote, right? Because there was so much evidence that they knew in conscience they could not declare that President Biden had won, right? I'll never forget, by the way, how do you remember? The first person to congratulate President Biden. You remember who that was?
Mm-mm.
It was like a week after the election or less, and the December 6th date hadn't happened, or when the states were supposed to certify them their own. There was a lot more votes weren't even totally counted yet. And it was President Bibi Netanyahu who was the first to say, "Congratulations, President Biden." Closely followed, I will say, by Archbishop Gomez of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops within like 8 days. Congratulating him for the victory, which it was still wasn't even decided yet, not even constitutionally, right? But all that being said, those people were led into a trap. I know a lot of the J6 people that went to prison, and we had images just recently on the screen of those people coming home from prison. I could watch this all day. I mean, they went through hell. They literally went through hell. People were destroyed. Families were destroyed. You had for years, people who were there or not even there on the day of, but maybe put like a post in favor of going to January 6th to make your voices heard. And they lived in fear with an FBI raid knocking down their doors, right? It happened. I know a lot of those people, and what they went through. We had Joe Thomas, who survived a year and a half in the DC gulags. They're one of our Mar-a-Lago events. Come and just kind of testify of what the torture that they went through. They were starved. They were deprived of water a couple days on end. They were in freezing cold, mold infested cells. They were not given due process. Some of them committed suicide. There were divorces that happened. And just a tragedy, such a tragedy. And what pains me, of course, President Trump gave pardons out. And by the way, this goes to, I know sometimes it seems like it's hopelessness. President Trump's up here, or this president's political figures up there, and how are they going to ever listen to we the people? A lot of this stuff happens because people who are just good citizens speak up. The presidential pardons for January 6th, in large part, were done because of the constant speaking up on behalf of them of Julie Kelly, a reporter. You see her often on Steve Bannon War Room, right? She did a lion's share and just bringing to light the situation, and eventually resulted with all of our help to get President Trump elected in the pardons of these J6ers who most of them did nothing wrong.
Right.
It's still sad. It's just a sad mark in American history. And yet, by the way, the pipe bomber. The pipe bombs that were dropped apparently outside the DNC and RNC headquarters was, I'm fogging the details, but that was a Fed, right? Who put that there?
Well, ostensibly, we're still working out the details, but the thing is that there's so much to this whole story that shows that there was government complicity involved in creating the situation that became
insurrection.
The insurrection. Yeah, but it's insurrection from the other side. They claim that it's insurrection from the people, but it wasn't. It was insurrection from the other side. It was insurrection from the Democrats, and it was done to cover up for the false election and the stolen election that they perpetrated that November. That's the whole thing. And this is why I keep talking about Venezuela in a multiple tiered level, because the money laundering, the electioneering, the false election that took place, the push for globalism Trump is, he has many warts. But the fact of the matter is that he is the most anti-globalist president we have ever had. And that's why they hate him as much as they do. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy a lot of the things that I'm seeing going on from this administration. I don't agree with everything, but I do see a lot of movement against the global mechanism that is trying to use the United States as a slush fund for world socialism, and also use the US military in order to put down those countries that might have the temerity to stand up against the push for global socialism. So I applaud Trump in much of what he's doing, and I stand by his acts against this global incursion.
Absolutely. He's done so many good things, and I think, but he needs prayers and he needs our voices
You
too.
bet.
Speaking of, because he's got a serious lobby which has a lot of control over him, and that's the Israeli lobby. And
Mhm.
Miriam Adelson giving $250 million to him, and Trump was very open about that and when he was in Israel, literally called her out and said, "Hey, which country do you love more, Israel or America? Sometimes I doubt which one you love more." Right? So there's a serious lobby over President Trump, and we have to really be speaking up, because it's such is the way of politics, right? So,
Yep.
let's January 6th. This goes back to how we started the show. Accountability. We have 2 years, really less, because if we lose the House, so much of our subpoena power to be able to go into this stuff and make those arrests will be gone, right?
Yep.
And it's a situation. It's a dire situation. So what's our hope? It's the Catholic Church, right? How the Catholic Church goes is how the culture around us will go. That Catholic Church is, the visible head of the church, the Holy Father, will be meeting with his cardinals. They already are actually meeting today and tomorrow in Rome. And I know they have a lot to talk about. Just thoughts about that consistory happening there in Rome. It's the first, it's significant because Pope Francis did not, famously did not get the cardinals together a lot to talk and be in contact and discussion, blah, 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 blah. Pope Leo, to his credit, God bless him, is doing that, trying to get them involved. That's needed. Thoughts on that?
Well, I'm curious as to what's going to come out of this consistory. I know that one of the top items is to discuss the liturgy, and in particular, how to address Traditionis Custodes and the suppression of the traditional Latin Mass, which was not desired by the vast majority of the bishops of the world. So, how that's going to be handled. And there was a proposal. The proposal sent to Rome.
Talk about that.
To effectively give the traditional Latin Mass community their own bishops, so that the traditional Latin Mass people who are attached to the traditional Latin Mass can work in concert with the local ordinaries. There won't be any full suppression of the traditional Latin Mass. So we can, I think that, there is reason for hope. And this is why I think Our Lady asked constantly for prayers for the Holy Father. A lot of people have dismissed Pope Leo as Francis 2.0 or as just another liberal pope. But the fact of the matter is, he is a pope who has the charism of office and he has the grace of office. And he requires our prayers, not just needs them, he requires them. And it is imperative that we continue to pray for the Pope, because we can't expect any kind of true leadership and any real hope for the church if we're not praying for him, if we're not winning over the graces he needs in order to guide the church the way that our Lord desires it to be done. So, yes, absolutely pray for the Pope, have hope, but I'm not going to place any expectations on what comes out of this consistory, but I do hold true hope that our Lord will ultimately guide the church the way he desires, even if we have temporary setbacks in the meantime.
I give credit to the priest who came up with that proposal. It's Father Louis Marie. I'm going to butcher this French. Father Louis de Marie de Bligneret. Okay. He created this proposal, sent it to 10 hard copies to 10 cardinals who are very much supporters of the traditional liturgy, and then he emailed it to the rest of the cardinals. So it was a serious proposal, right? Because there's a a crisis at hand in some ways within what's going on in the Roman Rite today. We have two forms, and it's been a point of division, right? And you have the worst situation, Diocese of Charlotte, right, where the local faithful and now the priests are up in arms against what the bishop is doing there, and his persecution of the Latin Mass it goes beyond the Latin Mass, where he's banned now altar rails, etc. And in a rare move, 30 priests came together. Most of them are pastors of the Diocese of Charlotte, okay, and have sent a dubia to Rome, basically like asking, is this legit? Can the bishop do this? Because it's against the general instructions of the Roman Missal to, which allows for people to receive on the tongue. So there is a bit of a crisis, and I applaud this priest for trying to address that in a respectful way, along with, of course, praying for it. And that's what we try to do in the same token, the same spirit at Catholics for Catholics with our book that we produced about synodality. And that's also going to be an issue that was going to be discussed, I'm sure, during this consistory, right? Synodality, we believe, is a Trojan horse. That's, in fact, the title of the book. Trojan horse, the attempt to invert the church's hierarchy in moral order within the Bride of Christ. Of course, the foreword is written by Cardinal Gerhard Mueller, former head of the Doctrine of the Faith. Again, our idea of this book is to put forth a solution and to make our pastors in a respectful way up to the Holy Father that this is not a good thing. This is synodality thing is no bueno. Okay. So you can get the book online and give it most importantly to your priest who are being challenged in some ways from the top down to have these synodal gatherings and discuss new ways of, quote, being church, whatever that means. We know what it means. It's an attempt to destroy the church, right? So final thoughts, Michael, as we wrap this up, this show.
Keep praying.
Keep praying.
That's it. Keep
praying.
Pray for the Pope, but also pray for the country. Pray for Donald Trump. We have to pray for our leaders, whether they're in clerical robes or wearing a suit and tie, and especially in those states that are under the occupation of the Democrat Party. And I say occupation because they're just as much communist as the outward communists.
In cities. First, again, New York City, this still gets me. The first time in American history that American politician was sworn in, not on the Bible, but on the Quran. What is that? That is not America.
No. And I think New York is going to see the same situation that London found out. But what we have to do is we have to pray. And we, especially in those blue controlled areas, you've got to pray specifically for your leaders, and you have to pray for your state, your country, your city, wherever you are, because that's really the only answer to any of the serious problems that we're undergoing. Pray.
Best way to help you pray in the liturgy. Best way to help you do that, right
Pray
here.
the rosary.
Well, that too. It's the Catholic Patriotic Calendar. Okay, this is awesome. We just got this off the shelves. I legit love this. Okay, I'm not being paid to promote this, but it is truly awesome. It has the traditional Latin Mass dates and the Novus Ordo combined, as well as significant dates in American history. You have it there. Every page of the month is a different figure in American history who's kind of shown they're Catholic, right? And they've shown just what they've done to bring their faith into the nation and serve the nation, right? So I highly recommend it. You get the links below to get this calendar. Great time at the start of the year as a gift or whatever. You can get it on our website too. On the note of prayer, okay? It's not cliche, people. Prayer works. Prayer has worked in American history. To close with this Catholic champion, we're going to play for you the video, which we've been releasing every single week, and you should totally watch those. They're so well done, so well produced, researched, and then done on video. It's called Catholic Patriotic Minute, where we take again a figure in American history, a Catholic who has really embodied what it means to be a Catholic living in this country, knowing that this is not the be all end all, with their eyes fixed on heaven, right? So this last episode, which we'll play for you now as we end off the show, really is a testament to the power of prayer. It was the War of 1812. The British had just burned down Washington, D.C. in August of 1814. Their eyes were set on New Orleans. If the British would have taken New Orleans on January 8th, 1815, then they would have to split the United States in two and stop the nation's expansion to the west. However, at the Battle of New Orleans, the United States prevailed. General Andrew Jackson emerged as a war hero from this battle. But gratitude for this victory is largely given to who?
Love
Blessed
of God.
Mother, under the title of Our Lady of Prompt Succor. The Virgin Mary's title, Our Lady of Prompt Succor, originates from an Ursuline nun, Mother Saint Michel in France. Because of the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution in 1793, she was required to flee her convent. Most of her religious sisters were executed at the guillotine or exiled. And to hear what happened, what the sisters did during the famous Battle of New Orleans, which actually happened 2 weeks after the war ended, oddly enough, you're going to have to watch the video and see how the power of prayer has worked. So don't just take it from me, take it from history. Prayer does work. Our Lady asked for it to pray, especially for the Pope. And we'll leave you with this video. We'll see you next week. This has been an edition of Catholic Champion. God bless and fight on.